If we're all set to go, if everyone's ready, welcome and thank you for joining us today for the Young Voters Engage the Candidates Mayoral Forum. My name is Prescott Smith here on behalf of Fuel Scottsdale, and I will serve as the moderator for the forum. It's a pleasure to welcome all 5 candidates in the Scottsdale mayoral race: Lisa Borowski, Suzanne Clapp, Virginia Cordy, Bob Littlefield, and David Ortega. Before we begin, I would like to thank our sponsor hosts for today's event: Scottsdale Rising Young Professionals, part of the Scottsdale Area Chamber of Commerce; Fuel Scottsdale, part of the Scottsdale Coalition of Today and Tomorrow; Scottsdale Leadership; and Scottsdale Community College. The participating groups have come up with a number of topics and questions for today's discussion, and a member of each of those groups will serve on our panel today to ask them. I will be the moderator to keep the discussion on track. Our panelists are Olivia Brancati of Scottsdale Leadership, Dominic Sanangelo of Scottsdale Rising Young Professionals, and Sarah Drennan of Scottsdale Community College. The goal today is to generate discussion on each of the issues we've identified. A panel member will direct a question to a specific candidate who will have a chance to answer it, and then I'll facilitate a conversation and call on other candidates who indicate they too would like a chance to answer. If candidates wish to comment, you can simply raise your hands or indicate that you'd like to answer, and I will call on you one by one. We will be time sensitive, and I may move us along from time to time to make sure we can address a variety of topics. We'd hope that no answer requires more than a 1-minute reply. Now we will open today with a question for each of the candidates to answer. And that question is, what are 5 words that describe you, your campaign, or your ideas for our city? We're looking for 5 words, not 5 sentences or 5 phrases. And we will start with Ms. Borowski.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. And 5 words, Prescott, do we have 5 words per category?
Just 5, no, 5 words total. So you can go on any of the categories we mentioned.
My first word is mom, proud mom to a 15-year-old daughter. My second word is lifelong Scottsdale resident. Those are 3 words together. Third word is practicing attorney for 20+ years. Again, a few more words. Keeping Scottsdale within its character and the special city that we know it. I'm sorry, I couldn't do 5.
It's a difficult task, especially starting off, I understand. Ms. Clapp.
I'd say progress, accomplished, unity, leader, and resilient.
Wonderful, thank you. Ms. Cordy?
Thank you, Prescott. Integrity, visionary, authentic, experience, quality.
Wonderful. Mr. Littlefield?
Hi, we're unmuted. Hope you're hearing me okay. I would say, if I had to pick 5 words off the top of my head, I would say transparent, dedicated, honest, listener, and what would be a 5th word? Energetic.
Wonderful, thank you. And Mr. Ortega, your 5 words.
Listen, learn, and lead. Smart Scottsdale.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for those thoughtful answers. We will now move over to Sarah as our first panelist who will direct a question.
Thank you so much. Ms. Borowski, younger people are the hope for our future, and the future belongs to our youth. So why should a young person vote for you?
Growing up in Scottsdale, I believe that I'm very much in touch with both our past, our current, and our future. I believe that people move to our community and live in our community and send their kids to our schools because we are such an amazing, high-end tourism draw type community, and people love living here, and I think that that's super important to keep in mind as we move forward. The second thing is I have experience. I served on the council for 1 term. I was instrumental in reining in the city's bloated budget And we did a great job back then, and I intend to do a great job as we see our way moving forward out of this financial setback that we've experienced. I'm a lawyer, as I mentioned at the outset. I analyze the subject matter. I educate myself in all the facts. I advocate for the best interests, of my clients for 23 plus years. And I will do that for the citizens of Scottsdale. I'm very much looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Borowski. Mr. Ortega, would you like to answer?
Sure. Well, thank you. I came to Scottsdale when I was 23 years old, worked as an apprentice architect for Benny Gonzalez, the architect for City Hall. I literally knew no one, but I fell in love here. We got married. We bought our house and we raised two beautiful children who love Scottsdale schools and their neighborhood friends. So in our neighborhood, we now see a resurgence of families and children as these houses turn over. Scottsdale is a combination of renovation and new growth. I love the energy that I arrived with when I came here as a young man, and I see it every day in all those possibilities of young families. So I have lived the full Scottsdale dream and that experience. And I love Scottsdale, and that's a passion and knowledge that I bring as I ask you to vote for me for mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Cordy, would you like to answer?
Yes, thank you, Preston. I know that our younger population is very interested in inclusivity. It's known that 77% of Arizona young people believe that we should have a non-discrimination ordinance here in Scottsdale. I've worked on that from 2015. I intend to continue to work on a non-discrimination ordinance for Scottsdale. Also believe that education is important to our younger people. And I've been an education advocate for decades. I've also been a teacher. I've also been on the advisory group for Scottsdale Community College for years. I believe our community colleges are the best kept secret in Maricopa County. I also believe that young people enjoy activities, and certainly our preserve is one of those wonderful icons for Scottsdale. And I am a preserve pioneer, one of 12 people that are recognized as being advocates since the beginning. I chaired the original task force that created the whole concept of the preserve. So I'm there. And then lastly, experience. Almost 8 years on the council, and looking forward to continuing my term as mayor for Scottsdale.
Thank you so much. Mr. Littlefield?
Well, a young person in Scottsdale should vote for me for the same reason a middle-aged person or one of my fellow geezers should vote for me, which is that I'm the candidate who is best qualified to keep Scottsdale a good place to live. I am best qualified to use your tax dollars wisely. Young people pay taxes just like old people do, and just like middle-aged people do. I'm the best candidate to keep you safe, which is really important, especially in today's world with all that's going on. And I'm the best candidate to keep Scottsdale a good, beautiful, good-looking place to live. So for that reason, I'm asking for votes from everybody. Young, old, middle-aged, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative. We're all Scottsdale residents, and I believe I'm the best candidate to keep Scottsdale a good place for people, no matter what their age, no matter what their attitude, no matter what their race.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. Ms. Clapp, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. When I was a young woman out of college and getting my first job, and as I progressed through my young professional career, what was most important to me, and I would imagine is to everybody listening, is that we have jobs available. We don't want to be living at home with our parents forever. So my platform is economic activity, creating high-paying jobs in Scottsdale is critically important. Also, you want to have a place to live. And so I believe in housing choices. I think that's very important for people to be able to live in the place they want to live, where they want to live, whether it's a single family home, whether it's a condo or a rental. So we need to provide options for people. Not everybody can afford a home, as well as the mortgage that goes with it. As well as, I think it's important to young people that they have a way to get to their jobs. So I'm a big supporter of public transportation. I serve on the Valley Metro RPTA, which operates public transit in the Valley. So I think transit's critical. Believe that young people are concerned about either having their own cars or finding a way to get to their jobs. So I think those are probably the three things. And finally, I believe that we should have a unified community. We should not have so much division. I'm the person that can help make that happen because I've always been able to work well with other people. And I plan to be, as mayor, the mayor that will unify and not divide.
Hey, thank you, Ms. Clapp. We'll now move over to Olivia, our second panelist, who will have a question.
So my question is for Ms. Clapp, and it's about attainable housing. There is a limited supply of attainable housing options for young professionals and their families in the city. Should Scottsdale offer developers incentives to build affordable housing? And if so, what kind?
I don't believe incentives is the way to go, but there are companies that are now focusing on attainable housing. I think we should encourage them. We should find ways to make sure that they can provide that housing in Scottsdale. Good example is Greenlight Communities has developed a project at Hayden and Oak, I think it is. And we need to make sure that there is no problem in having that project approved through the city level, because they are going to provide housing that's a little less costly than some of the very expensive rental properties that are going into Scottsdale right now. So my goal is to work with developers to help them find ways to improve the ability for people to either rent or buy. And incentives isn't really the answer, because then it creates unfairness. But we can emphasize, encourage, discuss, and talk with developers. And I know there are other nationwide rental property developers in particular that are looking at this issue and determining how they can build things that are a little less costly by perhaps not giving quite the high level of amenities that are going into many of the apartments that you're seeing today. Well, it doesn't mean they won't be bad. They just won't have quite all the amenities, and they can keep the rents down.
Thank you, Ms. Clapp. Mr. Littlefield, would you like to respond to the same question?
Sure, happy to. First of all, it's never going to be as cheap to live in Scottsdale as it is in Surprise or Glendale or Peoria. That's just a fact. That's the free market in work. So the question is, even with that, is there affordable housing in Scottsdale? Well, it depends on what you call affordable. If you go onto Zillow, sorry, real estate agents, but I don't have access to MLS. But I went on to Zillow this morning, and there are literally hundreds of properties available to buy for under $250,000. And there are literally hundreds of rentals to rent for under $1,000 a month. A lot of the people, like some of our police and firefighters, don't live here not because they can't afford it. They live here because they can get more house for their dollar in some place like Surprise or Peoria, and they're willing to make the commute in order to do that. So I think if we start getting the city into the business of taking care of affordable housing or subsidizing it or something like that, we're rapidly going to go down a financial rabbit hole we really don't want to go down.
Thank you. Would the other candidates like to say something? Answer this question, Ms. Borowski?
Yes, thank you. I definitely do not agree with government subsidizing developers, and so I would say no to the baseline question. In fact, I'm very proud. I was just learned that I'm the only mayoral candidate that was endorsed by the Arizona Free Enterprise Club, which is a pro-growth, platform, and they're very much involved in conservative candidates, me being one of them. And my idea, Scottsdale is a very special community. People aspire to live in Scottsdale. We're fortunate because we're part of a metropolitan area on, adjacent to Scottsdale boundaries. There are so many options for price points and a very short commute to Scottsdale if you're living in Tempe, for example, or in Phoenix. And I believe the way that we encourage young people, young families to buy into Scottsdale or rent in Scottsdale is through beautification programs in our aging areas, and making it easier to pull remodel permits, for example, supporting efforts to go into neighborhoods that are, are in need of rehabilitation and beautification. And so that's how we do it. Flooding the market with inexpensive apartments, well, we really don't have inexpensive apartments. The other thing about the rash of apartments that have been approved, they're really expensive rents. So that isn't the answer either. So my idea for, I'm sorry, are you saying something?
We try and wrap it up here quickly.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you.
Ms. Cordy?
Yes, thank you. I think attainable housing, affordable housing, workforce housing is one of the most difficult issues that we face in Scottsdale. Wouldn't it be great if our teachers and our nurses and our public safety brave young women could live here in Scottsdale? But we are somewhat of a victim of our own success in that our property values are higher than any place else in the valley, and a lot of people want to live here. So yes, we can work for it. We can create some attainable housing areas, but it's not going to meet the entire need. And I think that's where we need a robust transportation conversation in this city. I think it's important to note that when we updated the transportation master plan back in 2017, I was the only council person that voted against it because the other council members extracted anything around public transit and anything about, public transit. I think that was irresponsible. And we need, as a community, to move forward and create those ideas and be innovative on how we're going to move 87% of our workforce from other communities to here. Thank you, Prescott.
Then Mr. Ortega.
Thank you. There are two levels of consideration for affordable housing. First one is at the federal level. Scottsdale is a net donor. That is, Scottsdale citizens, businesses contribute more to the federal government than we get in return for housing subsidies and housing participation that could be available through our housing authority. The other level, of course, is that Scottsdale does not recover our transportation dollars. So on both those levels, as a mayor, I will work hard to bring those dollars home. Local government, the worst subsidy that has been happening has been the high density, height, and waivers, allowances that the present city council has been handing out. And I say that because that is a huge subsidy, and it's generally written to reward high end. Every project that comes through Scottsdale has to leverage and quit giving away these subsidies like candy.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Now we'll move over to Dominic, our next panelist, who has an additional question.
Sorry, let me unmute myself. This question can be for any of the candidates, but I suppose we'll start with Ms. Borowski. This question is about change. You know, change is an inevitable thing, and 2020 has taught us that change can be unexpected at times. Scottsdale was changing before the pandemic and all the other things that have happened this year. And so my question is, How can the city continue to grow and change and evolve and enhance its economic base, yet maintain its unique character of what makes Scottsdale, Scottsdale?
Thank you, Dominic, for the question. I sat on the board of the Convention and Visitors Bureau for a term, and that is now called Experience Scottsdale. I was always, the reason I was on the board, I believe, is because I was so pro-tourism. And I learned a lot through the experience and how much tourism draws to our community in terms of revenue. We've had a setback here because of COVID-19, but we will recover from that. We will resume being the national, international draw that we are, because we are a beautiful tourism draw. And I start there because it's critical to our future that we keep that in mind. Turning our downtown core into a downtown city like Phoenix would not be the reason that people visit Scottsdale. And once they visit Scottsdale, they want to live in Scottsdale. I can't tell you how many times, I'm sure all the candidates have heard this. I came to visit Scottsdale on a vacation or for a conference, and it was my dream to live in Scottsdale, and now I do. That story and that situation is repeated so frequently, and that is what leads to our growth. The people that come here, they spend money here, they want to invest in our community, have a second home, start their headquarters here, their corporate headquarters here. And we have to keep our eye on what has made us great, what has made us significant in terms of a national, international tourism draw, and keep that feature, keep our character. And additionally, I know I'm getting the whistle. Thanks, Prescott.
Ms. Cording, would you like to take a stab at this one too?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So Scottsdale, we have less than 2% of our land that has yet to be developed. 27% of it has been preserved in our McDowell-Sonoran Preserve. So how do we continue to grow and maintain our character? Well, actually, I think we've been doing a pretty good job. And if you look at our general plan, and if you look at the specific character area plans that we have updated, such as for downtown and along the 101 freeway, you will see we have opportunities there for growth, and that includes some height, and that includes some density, to attract those well-paying jobs, to attract those corporations that bring the well-paying jobs so that our citizens can afford to live, work, and grow and fulfill dreams here. Our citizens deserve to have well-paying jobs and not have to go to Gilbert or go to Central Phoenix for that career. So diversifying our economy is a big thing for us, and also celebrating our unique areas. North is always going to be rural, Midtown is always going to be suburban, and southern part of Scottsdale is going to be urban. That is our opportunity for growth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Littlefield? Oh, looks like you're on mute.
There we go. Change. You know, it's funny. I have, in my 30 years in the computer industry, I probably experienced and navigated more change than everybody else up here put together. And one of the lessons I learned is there's good change and there's bad change, okay? Good change would allow Scottsdale to grow and evolve in accordance with our general plan, which was, by the way, approved by the voters. Bad change is what we've been seeing for the last 8 years, in which basically the character of Scottsdale has, by the city council majority, been radically threatened by the amount of urbanization and tall buildings, dense buildings they've approved, not just in downtown, but all over the city. So change, fine. Evolve, yeah, we obviously need to evolve. But the way we've been evolving for the last 8 years is not good. And that's why we need to change direction. And that's why I'm running for mayor. That's why my campaign motto is keep Scottsdale special. Right now, the direction this city is headed in is to become a pale copy of any town USA. Well, if we become a pale copy of Anytown, USA, who's going to want to come here for tourism and who's going to want to live here? So one other thing I would say is clearly people aren't paying attention to some of the change that's going on right now. People who want to live in Scottsdale still have the opportunity to live in Scottsdale, but we have proven over the last couple of months that most people, most office workers don't have to live where they work. If you work in Scottsdale as a computer programmer, you don't have to live here. You could live anywhere you can get high bandwidth internet. You could live in Alaska. That's going to have a radical effect on how we develop Scottsdale. Fewer office buildings, fewer apartments.
Thanks so much. Ms. Clapp, would you like to answer this question as well?
Yeah, well, I don't agree that we're going to be a pale shade of ourselves in the future. I believe that we're heading in the right direction, and all the surveys that the city has taken has shown that people that live here think that this is a great city, and they believe we are heading in the right direction. So I mentioned beginning in my description of myself that I'm resilient, and I'm very resilient to change, have been all my life. Change does not make me fearful. I've gone through many changes in my life, probably more than Bob, even though he thinks he has. So my feeling is that we have to embrace change and understand that we need to build a city of the future. And also that means, as I mentioned earlier, that we have to create jobs. And that means we have to have quality economic activity throughout the city. And a good example is the nationwide project up on the 101 is one I supported. I believe that that project is going to add 5,000 or 6,000 jobs, and probably even more than that once it's built out. And those are high-paying jobs. So these are great opportunities for the city to not fight change and instead agree to a project that's going to be good for the entire city, because those jobs mean not only that all of the people that are sitting here are going to have a better chance of getting a job, but those people spend their money in Scottsdale. If they work here, they spend money here. And those buildings that are being built create taxes. And the people that are spending their money are creating sales taxes. So the economic activity in Scottsdale is great, and it needs to be continued on. And it will change, because we will see a change in the types of architecture and types of things that are developed, but it's a good thing. Thank you.
Mr. Ortega?
Well, you know, Scottsdale has grown organically using a roadmap called the general plan. That's a vision of the city I worked on when I was a sitting city councilman. It has not been renewed for 10 years. My fellow candidates had their chance when they held office, and they could not get that done. What we have today is an erosion in trust at City Hall, and that's caused by a failure to listen to the residents and stakeholders and update our general plan. Instead, mayor and council went off on their own and relabeled 75 blocks, and from Miller all the way to 68th, and from Chaparral all the way to Earl. And they are allowing basically 6 to 12 story buildings wall to wall. That does not fit our brand. It was not approved by the citizens of Scottsdale, and that's why we had the rejection of the Southbridge project. So we do need to change, and we need to grow smarter.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. All right, now we will head back to Sarah, who has another question.
Thank you so much. Ms. Clapp, Gandhi once said, "Our ability to reach unity in diversity will be the beauty and the test of our civilization." Please share an example of how you have demonstrated a commitment to diversity in a prior situation.
Well, if you want to call diversity also embracing the fact that some people don't like diversity, I think most recently I have been most vocal about some of the comments that are coming from a councilman about a incident that occurred a few days ago, where many people were upset about using words from George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement to basically get a crowd of people to laugh at him. That's certainly not embracing diversity. That is certainly a attitude that I don't embrace at all. And I came out very vociferously right after it and say I don't accept it. And I believe that it's wrong and that that councilman really should examine stepping down from his job. So this is a good example of, if we're going to be a diverse community, we got to call out people when they are not accepting diversity and in fact being racist.
Thank you. Other council or the other candidates, Mr. Ortega?
Well, thank you. You know, when our children were in school, I got involved as a parent, and we joined Scottsdale Leadership as well, partners with the school district, Scottsdale Community College, and the city itself. And we formulated an outreach called Erase Hate. Erase Hate is a program of dialogue that started on the steps of Saguaro High School. And it's not just for kids. It involves a realization that we should have social justice at all levels. It's not just for kids. In fact, kids know fairness and equality better than all of us. So as mayor, I will lead in that sector. I believe that we will reclaim, let's just say, the negative situation that was brought on by that councilman, that it's not us. He does not speak for me or other families. So I look forward to leading Scottsdale in a positive, equal justice for all campaign. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Cordy. I saw that you'd
Thank you.
something.
Thank you, Prescott. So I go back to 2015 when I worked with many members of our community to have a non-discrimination ordinance passed in our city. So know that I brought together the Chamber and Experience Scottsdale and Nationwide and Honor Health and the Realtors, Association Realtors, all in support of non-discrimination ordinance. And that would have provided LGBTQ equality in the workplace, in housing, and in public accommodations. Our council voted 5-2 to reject that ordinance. And of course, I and Linda Milhaven were the dissenting votes. I think that's important to know as we move forward into this mayoral election. Non-discrimination ordinance and non-discrimination is important to our community. I also understand the new word that's coming out called systemic discrimination, or shall we say unbiased, systemic discrimination, that it really is a human condition and has been a human condition since the beginning of recorded history. And I think that's important. Thank you, Prescott.
Mr. Littlefield?
Well, talk is cheap, and action is the only thing that really matters. And back in the day, I think it was 2009, the Scottsdale City Council narrowly approved a non-discrimination ordinance for LGBT employees of the city. And I was the swing fourth vote to make that happen. And it was very controversial at the time. So some of us have actually put ourselves on the line for non-discrimination, and that would be me. So I think I have the credentials. I can say I don't discriminate in my own life, and I don't, but it's what you do publicly that really makes the difference. And I believe that that shows that I am not a biased or bigoted person.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. Ms. Borowski?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to pick the top two most current examples of my commitment to helping further diversity in our community. I was asked to join the Scottsdale Charros Foundation Board a little over a year ago, and as most people know, it's historically an all-male civic organization. They do great work in our community. They run Scottsdale Stadium for spring training. They raise a ton of money. We raise, excuse me, a ton of money. Now I'm a proud member of the group. A ton of money for our schools, Scottsdale schools, the underprivileged, and the elderly. And as part of my involvement and as part of the Charros Charge, they, you know, having been an all-male organization historically, they've been working very, very hard to open the doors and create a diverse environment. And I'm working very hard with them in doing that. The second, most recent example is my daughter and I are proud members of National Charity League. And we work, as part of our philanthropic work, we've done the Welcome to America project, which is a great program. We raise money, you know, to work with the philanthropic, the charity, getting tongue-tied. The charity raises the money or takes donations for furniture, and we go and help them move in. We deliver all the furniture, bikes, etc., and welcome them to our community. Thank you.
All right, we will move back to Olivia for her second question.
So some of you did touch on this in your last answer, but I do want to give you the opportunity to discuss it further. So we found ourselves in a historic time of an ongoing pandemic and a reckoning of racial injustice throughout the nation. What should the City Council do in reaction to Councilman Guy Phillips' comments, "I can't breathe," at last week's protest over masks? And that question is first going to Ms. Cordy.
Thank you. It is an unfortunate circumstance. I was there. I was the only candidate or current city council member to observe that. And when I heard him say that and take the mask off, it was very choreographed. It was very intentional. And I gasped. I was so surprised and saddened by that. So what do we do about it? I believe that the council should make a unified a strong statement requesting his resignation. Please know that our charter does not allow us to eliminate him from the council. That is his decision. But I believe that the council, as a unified voice, needs to strongly urge Councilman Phillips to resign.
Thank you, Ms. Cordy. Mr. Littlefield, would you like to answer the question?
Sure. Yeah, Phillips spoke thoughtlessly and insensitively. What he said was insensitive. He has actually been criticized by all of the other members of the council and by myself for having said it. Shouldn't have done that. But I think that there are some people who are trying to keep this controversy alive for political reasons. As my colleague Virginia Cordy pointed out, the council cannot accede. They don't have the legal power to accede to the demand to remove Phillips from office. But just so happens there's an election coming up, and in 6 weeks, the voters of Scottsdale, who by the way are the only people who really have the moral authority to decide who sits up on the dais, the citizens of Scottsdale, the voters of Scottsdale, will have their opportunity to weigh in on Guy Phillips. And if they feel that Guy Phillips doesn't deserve to be on the city council, they will dump him. And if they feel that he made an honest mistake and needs to stay there, then they will keep him. And that's really who should decide this in the end. As I said, all of the other council people have criticized and condemned what he said, as I have too.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. Mr. Ortega?
Well, my phone rang off the hook. My cell phone was rattling, and I immediately expressed my feelings. His actions and his words were repulsive to me. And I stated that on Facebook and other social media. it was printed as well. But I went further because everything isn't always printed. I said, if any individual had said that, or even a city employee had said that, they would be fired. And Councilman used city property and freedom of speech, which I know we recognize, but he used that to really tarnish Scottsdale as well. And for that reason, I unequivocally also believe that that insensitivity must be condemned by the people or the council as a whole. As mayor, I would condemn it, and I ask for the voters to reject the person that said such a.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Ms. Borowski.
Yes, thank you. Obviously, the comments are indefensible, evidenced poor judgment, and I'm sure Councilman Phillips would agree the comments were outrageous and unwise. Having said that, I also think the situation, he has apologized. I don't know him personally, and I was not there. And again, there's nothing to say in defense of the comments. However, I'm told by people that do know him well, he's a good and decent person, and he made a mistake, and he has apologized. Whether or not the voters forgive him, that will be their choice. I have my own personal feelings about it, and I'm sure everybody does. But once you put elected officials in the position of being the judge and the jury for other elected officials, you've created a very big problem for everyone, especially the voters. And practically speaking, if you remove him from office right now, which I understand the council majority is trying to do, it creates a problem for the city. It creates more work for the staff. It potentially creates exposure to legal action, which I think would be a certainty. And you still have a candidate that's going into an election. You can't get him off the ballot for that. So let the voters decide the fate of Councilman Councilman Phillips. And that's the critical path.
Thank you, Ms. Borowski. I know you mentioned a little bit, Ms. Clapp, but did you have any further comments?
Yeah, I believe that Mr. Phillips has been a friend of mine. I'm not calling Mr. Phillips a bad person, but you have to understand there are consequences on actions and words that you use. And in this instance, he needs to see what those consequences are. One of the big ones is our tourism is being affected. The thousands of emails I'm getting are not only from Scottsdale, but I'm getting them from many parts of the United States as well as in Europe, who are contacting and saying, I'll never come to Scottsdale again because of comments that were made by your councilman. So my thought is that even though he's a friend of mine, I cannot give him a pass on this because he has made some remarks in the past that we've allowed him to apologize for. But this apology to many people rings hollow. So now we're left with the suggestion that we could write a joint letter. I don't like the joint letter idea. Each one of us has already written a letter. Every one of us has put a letter on the website that said how we feel about his remarks. Mine was the only one that said he should consider resigning. I didn't say he had to because I don't have the right to do that. I'm not trying to do this politically. I'm not running against Guy Phillips. He's running for council. But morally, he's got a problem here. He's got to recognize. And my feeling is the only course of action we can take. We cannot get rid of him because the voters will do that. But we can take a step of censuring him. And we probably should be considering doing that because that's the only thing else we can do.
Thank you, Ms. Clapp. Now we will head back to Dominic for his second question.
Sure, and I'll direct this to Ms. Corti to start since you mentioned education earlier in your remarks. Do you think the city and schools in Scottsdale's boundary should collaborate to help each other? And if so, what are your ideas for making that happen? And as a follow-up question, what can the city council do to help schools reopen classrooms this fall in wake of the COVID-19 concerns?
Thank you. Is the question specifically to our school districts, SUSD, Paradise Valley, or is it broader than that?
I'll let you interpret it. I think I meant mostly just the school districts within the boundaries.
Long ago, the council, and it was before I was on council, but there was a monthly meeting between the city council and the board of supervisors for SUSD, and there was a greater collaboration. We've lost that collaboration. That's number one. That's what I believe we need to get back to. But I also believe that just simple conversations will provide better use of amenities. So for example, I brought together the current superintendent of SUSD with our city manager about the Tonalea site on 68th Street and Oak. And through a simple conversation, now so that's school property, but we are building soccer fields for the community. They are putting together or renovating a building for a community center. And now we have 10 acres that really is a great amenity to that neighborhood and our soccer fans.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
I think I saw Mr. Littlefield's hand.
Well, actually, I was just holding it up, but that's okay. I was going to answer the question anyway. I was just sort of waving it around. My dog was asking for attention, and of course you got to give him that. All right, so the schools and the city council, city government. As most people understand who grew up here, but which is quite surprising to people from back east, the city doesn't run the schools like it does in New York or Philadelphia or whatever. School districts have their own governing boards, and they have their own boundaries and their own budgets and their own funding sources. And in fact, there are 5 different school districts that have part of their areas in Scottsdale. So technically, there's no back and forth in between. But that doesn't mean that we can't cooperate and we can help. So when I was first elected to city council, we had a Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board / City Council Liaison Committee. And I was a member of that. That was eliminated during the Lane years. And if I'm elected mayor, I'll bring that back. But more to the point, I spent 5 years on the Youth Sports Field Task Force. It was a time back in the early part of this century when the school district didn't have enough money to keep their ball fields, soccer fields, little league fields up. So we cut a deal with them where our parks department would go out and grade the fields and seed them and water them. I personally spent a lot of time at Cochise School when I was a soccer coach and board member trying to get rid of the Gophers with little success, by the way. They turned out to be more tenacious than expected. But so there's lots we can do to get along with the school district. I have a history of doing that, and that will certainly be something that will continue if I'm elected mayor.
Thank you, sir. The other candidates, Mr. Ortega?
Well, schools are key because our schools are the core of our neighborhoods. Just the way our churches are, and the after program run by Boys and Girls Club. So it's very vital that we have that line of communication. And there's an adage that communication must have oxygen, or it will die. I was on the joint city council and school district commission. We did talk frequently. We had to. Why? Because they're all our families. These are the kids that grew up with our kids. I remember meeting the Dawsons when I was pushing a stroller up Lincoln, and the Dawsons were pushing their stroller the other direction. That's the core of who we are, and that's why it's important that we must rebuild that. As mayor, I will reinstitute that communication. Communication needs oxygen, and we need to let that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clapp?
Well, there's a couple areas that haven't been mentioned that I'd like to just bring up as areas that the city is already working with the school system, but because of the COVID pandemic, I'm not sure how it's going to be handled, and we need to make sure that we're having conversations about it. One of them is that we offer after school programs to kids at our various centers. And those obviously are not operating right now because school is out, but we need to be thinking about how we're going to offer those programs as they come forward when school opens. How can we offer those programs safely, because we may still be in a situation where we're wearing masks and have to socially distance. So that's got to be a conversation that should be taking place. I can't say if it is or it isn't, but it's one thing. Then we also need to look at how we're going to do our back to school program that the city puts on every summer. Typically, we have a program that's offered in one of our facilities, and 1,000 low-income children are brought in and given backpacks and set up for examinations to get back into school, given shoes and clothes and a variety of things. And how are we going to do that when we, first of all, don't know when school is starting? And secondly, how are we going to properly handle that under these pandemic situations? How we're going to social distance. So we got a problem to deal with right now.
Thank you so much. Ms. Borowski.
Thank you. As part of my work on the Charros board, I also serve with a member of the governing board of SUSD. As Mr. Littlefield pointed out, the City Council does not oversee the Scottsdale schools. However, as mayor, I will work hard to influence the betterment of Scottsdale schools. There's a lot you can do working with the board and the administration for Scottsdale schools as mayor to better the school system. We also have to take a hard look at how do we deal effectively with the exposure or opportunity for drugs in our schools. That is the elephant in the room. We've seen a lot, not recently, because school's been out of session, but in the last year, we did see significant events that occurred in our schools. And that should be a top priority for all of us. I think, unfortunately, our schools are a weakness right now. As part of my work with the Charros, we do raise money for the schools and after-school programs to supplement what SUSD does. However, we can do better. And I do think, to a large extent, it starts with the issue of addressing and extricating the drug problem in our schools. By the way, I matriculated in Scottsdale schools, and it was bad back then. So, and I'm sure it is no better now. One other thing quickly I want to add, I think we have an opportunity with Scottsdale Community College and the community college system to transition into a more vocational centered technical program. Thank you.
Thank you, Borowski. So I actually think we have time for one more question from our panelists. Does anyone have one that they would specifically like? Sarah, Olivia, Dominic?
Sure. I'm not sure what order we want to go in or who wants to go next in terms of the candidates answering the question, but I had one more question just in general on the economy in Scottsdale, and where do you see the opportunities for future job growth in the city, and where should those be located? As a follow-on, assuming we can attract those types of jobs, how do we attract and retain high quality talent?
Why don't we start with Mr. Littlefield?
Okay, the question was about economy and jobs.
Yeah, exactly. Where do you see the job growth potential in Scottsdale? You know, what types of jobs? Where do you think they'll be? How do you think we'll fill them with talent?
Well, I think it's interesting. Obviously, our economy has taken a hit from the COVID-19 shutdown, lockdown, everything else. But let's talk about the future. This isn't going to be, first of all, this pandemic is far from over, all right? That really is not going to be over until there's a vaccine. And that's not going to be until it's got to be developed, it's got to be tested, it's got to be manufactured, hundreds of millions of doses. So that's not going to happen anytime soon. Secondly, as the world becomes more crowded, we're going to have more of these pandemics. So I think we have to take the lessons that we should have learned from this pandemic, and we're going to have to say, hey, what does that hold for the future? And one of the things we found is there's a lot of stuff that we found that doesn't need to be done in a room, in a meeting room, and it can be done remotely. Education, we found out that a large portion of schooling, education at every level, can now be done remotely. Once again, with high-speed internet, you can, be educated on whatever particular class anywhere. Same thing with working. The demand for office space is not only going to decline, but think about this. If you're a telemarketer, if you're a computer programmer, once again, you don't have to live in Scottsdale, even if your job is here. You can live wherever you want. So the economics of jobs, not just in Scottsdale, but everywhere, are going to change radically. And we have to think about that. We have to think about how we're going to do that. For instance, I had to laugh. Somebody was talking about the nationwide development up north, which was
we're running out, so if we could finish up quickly.
Okay, well, those guys have now just announced that they're going to send most of their workers at home. So all this plan about them building all these big buildings, office buildings, has now gone completely down the tubes. So we have to think about that for jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. Ms. Borowski?
Yes, thank you. Government does not create jobs. What government can do is clear the path and adopt policies that allow the free market to flourish. I mentioned earlier that I was recently endorsed by the Arizona Free Enterprise Club, and that's exactly their platform and one that I completely subscribe to. Entrepreneurs and private enterprise are the principal drivers of our economy. As I talked about earlier, so is tourism. The way that you create jobs or help create jobs, help the private market create jobs, is you essentially make it a beautiful place to live, work, and send your kids to school in. And that's what we need to keep our eyes on, and that is what I'm dedicated to doing. You also have less restrictive access or business access. You make it easier and welcoming for people to start their business here, to grow their business here. You keep property taxes low, and I've already talked about the schools. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Clapp.
Well, as your mayor, I've mentioned this before, jobs are key, and I will focus on jobs. I realize that government doesn't create them, but they create the conditions that allows the jobs. And Mr. Littlefield mentioned the nationwide project is a good example. Much growth is going to occur along the 101 freeway. Nationwide has not announced that they're removing any jobs from Scottsdale. In fact, they're consolidating jobs from other cities into Scottsdale. They're going to have 4 regional centers. And if we had not approved that move to the 101, they would not be locating all those jobs in Scottsdale. So the majority of council that voted for that project actually saw the future and the need for creating economic activity and job creation at that location. Nationwide has told us they have no intention of dropping any jobs from the plan in Scottsdale, but they are removing them from other cities. But also we need to realize there's going to be job creation in the downtown area as well as in the McDowell Road area. Those are the 3 places. Related to the downtown, I believe very much in the free market, and the project that we've not really talked about, which is Southbridge, was a project brought by a local business person to grow a business in the downtown area, and citizens tried to stop that free market enterprise from occurring in downtown. So you really got to examine some people saying they're all for the free market.
Thank you, Ms. Clapp. Mr. Ortega.
Well, the COVID pandemic capsized our national economy, and you can call it pivoting or rethinking. Our full recovery is going to start locally. As I first mentioned, I came to Scottsdale as a 23-year-old with a job, and I actually knew no one when I came here, but I learned how to take projects through the city. When I was 25 years old, I went to the city council with my first project representing a condominium project. And I've I understand how a city can grow wisely. I was fortunate to be elected as city councilman, and I sat in the Kiva, which was designed by the architect that gave me my first job. So that's how much of love I have for the city. And I believe that we will work our way through this temporary situation. My vision of Scottsdale is welcoming to new businesses, keeping the businesses we have, protecting neighborhoods, and preserving our desert. And that's why I ask you to look at my website, electdaveortegamayor.com.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Ms. Cordy, the last word on this topic?
Thank you, Preston. So really the key question here is how do we retain high quality talent? Most of our graduates from our colleges are moving out of town, moving into other communities because that's where the jobs are. I believe that we need to, so if you've ever heard of, well, we need to build our own talent pool. And some of you may have already heard of the Knoxville Promise. That has expanded to the Tennessee Promise, but it was based on a program by private individuals and private companies creating a nonprofit to provide scholarships to any graduating student out of the high schools in Knoxville to provide them a 2-year scholarship into the community college system. And that builds loyalty, but it also creates it also puts higher education at a much more accessible level. That's how we build our talent pool, and that's how we attract companies, because we have the talent that they're looking for. And then, of course, I believe we're starting to, so second point on attraction is we need the inventory of Class A office space, and we're starting to do that. We're doing it along the 101 between Scottsdale and Hayden, and also we're doing it in our old town. So between Class A office space and creating more accessible higher education so that we grow our own talent is imperative. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cordy. All right, so that wraps up our panelist questions, and I have one last question for each candidate, which again, we'd like to keep our answers to a minute if possible. What is your vision that would inspire our children for the future of our city? What is your vision that would inspire our children or your grandchildren, not to put anyone in an age bracket, but for the future of our city? Mr. Ortega, why don't we start with you?
I am an example of how education, family tradition, and the opportunity of Scottsdale come together and create a beautiful family, contribute to our schools, grow our education, and give back to the community. I believe my worldwide experience, state experience, and local experience is invaluable. And I ask for your vote because I have lived that Scottsdale dream. And I know that if we listen, learn from others, and lead, we can have a greater Scottsdale. Thank you so much. Please go to my website, electdaveortegamayor.com.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ortega. Mr. Littlefield?
There we go. Well, I think that the thing that would be most appealing to my children or my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren would be to keep Scottsdale a great place to live. And I think if you look at my record of the 12 years I was on the city council, plus my civic involvement since then, when I got off the council, I didn't stop being involved. I've done a lot of things since then, worked on 420, worked on the Southbridge referendum, I've done a lot of other things. Keeping Scottsdale a great place to live, a beautiful place to live, and most importantly, a safe place to live is what will motivate people to live here regardless of their age or their generation. And I think if you look at my record of the 12 years I was on the city council, you'll see I'm as resident friendly and as dedicated to keeping Scottsdale special as you can find. And you can find out about that record at my website, which is boblittlefield.com. And in there, there's not only extensive documentation of what I did, but also ways to contact me if people have further questions about my record or about my policies, and I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. Ms. Cordy.
Thank you, Prescott. What I believe would inspire our children is to improve our environment. For decades, so our city has been built upon the vision of citizens, and over decades, the citizens have consistently identified the importance of open space in the environment. And I think that is even more important today. So my idea is around an urban forest program. And what that means, well, that means it's not a new concept. Tempe is doing it, Phoenix is doing it. Scottsdale should be doing this. We should have taken the lead on this. But it's the concept of creating a 25% canopy of shade using desert adapted trees. So, and science has proven that if you create a 25% canopy, you can significantly reduce the ambient temperature and significantly increase the air quality for our citizens. It's a no-brainer. Urban forest program tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Clapp.
Well, mine is somewhat all-encompassing because Scottsdale has won a number of awards in the past, the best city for a variety of things. So as mayor, I would strive that Scottsdale would be the best city in the nation to live, the best city in the nation to have a family, the best city in the nation to find a job, and the best city in the nation to enjoy nature. I think that we can get those awards. We've won many in the past. I will work toward that in the future because I believe that we are a great city and will continue to be. If you want to learn more about me, you can visit my website, which is suzanneclapp.com. Appreciate very much this program and being able to talk to all the people that are listening. Thank you.
So much, Ms. Clapp. And final word to Ms. Borowski.
Thank you very much. I will continue to advocate for the citizens of Scottsdale as their mayor and move our community forward, advancing the principles that I believe in and I believe the residents believe in, which is keeping our community the interesting, high standard, beautiful, lots of events, things to do community that we've always been and we should be as we move into the future. I think some key things that need to occur rather swiftly for everybody's benefit is to improve our pedestrian infrastructure, especially in the downtown and Old Town core. It needs to become far more safer, far more beautiful, far more kept up, and those things need to happen readily, and also improve our bike access through our community, not just on the Greenbelt, but around in the downtown and Old Town core and all over for the safety of bikers. I think that's a real opportunity. I also would continue to advance my passion for tourism, which benefits residents and business and employees, business owners here. I would want to do things. I led the charge to expand the Tony Nelson Equestrian Center. As we all know, we have fabulous events there. I think we could definitely work on other opportunities in that regard. For example, an outdoor music center or amphitheater. I will be dedicated to thoughtful and educated decisions for the citizens of Scottsdale. Thank you.
Thanks so much. In closing, we'd like to thank all 5 of the candidates for joining us today in this conversation, and we wish you good luck in your campaigns. This forum has been recorded and will be available starting the week of July 6th via YouTube from the host organizations, the Scottsdale Area Chamber of Commerce, Scottsdale Leadership, Scottsdale Community College, and Scott. We will be providing links to our constituent groups and the public, as well as both the Scottsdale Independent and Scottsdale Progress for promotion. So thank you, everyone, and this concludes our program for today.
Thank you.